Started. So welcome everyone this Valentine's Day reading. What a strange day to have a reading, but strangely appropriate with this particular reader. So I'm Catherine Coles, the Trias director this year, and this is the last Trias reading curated by our wonderful, incomparable writer-in-residence, Donald Ravel. And I am the opening act tonight. I'm going to introduce the introducer of tonight's reader. So before I do a few announcements and reminders, our spring week-long writer-in-residence, the super buzzy, fantastic fiction writer Justin Trias will be here the last week of March, and he'll be giving a craft talk, and he'll be giving a reading, and he'll be meeting with students. So keep your eye out for more information when the time rolls around, because he'll be terrific. You do not want to miss this series of events around his week-long residency. We'll have another brilliant Trias writer-in-residence arriving in the fall, this time a fiction writer whose name we cannot yet reveal to you. But keep this in mind when you register for classes. The Trias class is a Write Your Way In class that's open to anyone, so you just have to send a sample of your writing to next year's director, Melanie Hamilton, closer to the time of registration. But it's, people get in who are rising sophomores all the time. And we like to have a good spread. People get in who are not English majors. So just try, if you're at all interested in writing fiction and in creative writing, consider trying for this class. Lots of people in departments go into the making of the Trias reading series and making it as completely lovely as it is, so thank you for your patience as I quickly name a few of them, since this is the last reading I will be presiding over this year. First and foremost, always we have to thank Sue Gage, who is practically perfect in every way, and the only reason my head doesn't fall off and thanks to Brian, who generously sells books at our readings even on Valentine's Day, which is wonderful. Thank you so much. And just to remind you, books make wonderful, thoughtful, last-minute Valentine's Day gifts, and you can get them signed after the reading. There's a book called Oh Heart for sale right now. That seems very appropriate for the occasion. Thanks to the people you don't see here, the buildings and ground crew. I always like to thank who set up our chairs and rooms for the reading, and the members of IT who always set up our sound. So much goes into any event on the campus, and it's important to point to how many people work to make things happen. I want to thank the English department and the Trias committee, David Weiss, and back there, and Melanie Hamilton for their constant and wholehearted dedication to creative writing on this campus. And I want to thank Peter Trias, our patron saint of creative writing, without whom none of this would be possible. The amazing world-class readers and residents we lure out to Little Geneva every year. The numerous soul-moving readings I've seen in this very room, this very year, school year. And I want to thank, of course, Donald Ravel, this year's writer-in-residence, and my poetic father, and my dear friend, for his articulate intelligence, his wisdom, and grace. I feel like I learned as much from him this semester as any of you who were lucky enough to be his formal students these last few luminous months. And I will always remember it as personally deeply formative and dear to me. Please join me in saying thank you truly, Don. And now I'm delighted to hand the mic over to Mr. Ravel to introduce our fantastic reader for the night.
Happy Valentine's Day indeed. I Heart Geneva. I've seen that bumper sticker enough times that I actually entirely concur. I first encountered the work of Claudia Keelan in the fall of 1990, when I was serving as editor-in-chief of Denver Quarterly. My assistant brought in an envelope addressed to my attention, containing poems about which he and my other assistants were very enthusiastic. I opened the envelope and began to read. Immediately, I was was transported to a landscape of vivid, sometimes luminous, sometimes terrifying, human consequences. An infant's howl echoing beneath the Charles River in Boston. A family portrait throwing itself into barbed death upon electric wire. A mother's lantern radiating across a snowfield, lighting a daughter's way home. A three-legged dog limping across the constellations of a new heaven above the earth. Here was a landscape impossible to postpone. Here were human consequences impossible to gainsay. And here was a poet unlike any other of her generation. Of course, I published those poems. Of course, I married the poet. I had no alternative. And here I think that I touch upon the unique genius of Claudia Keelan. It is the usual task of poetry to seek, Aeneas-like, among alternatives. As John Ashbery vowed, I tried each thing, only some were immortal and free. But it is Keelan's supernumerous mission to advocate for the immortality of each, and in behalf of the freedom which each, in our disgraceful era, is so chronically, casually, cruelly denied. Imagine, if you will, a poetical Clarence Darrow, hired by heaven itself to defend both its angels and its sparrows. Imagine, too, an advocate whose eloquence is not merely rhetorical, but visionary, and whose victories abolish all precedents on behalf of the new heaven and new earth. You get the picture. A graduate of Humboldt State University and of the Iowa Writers Workshop, Keelan has taught at Boston College, Rhodes College, the universities of Iowa and of Alabama, and is now a professor of English and Barrett Distinguished Scholar at UNLV, where she edits the journal Interim. Her critical writings have been collected as Ecstatic Emigre by the University of Michigan Press. Her seventh and most recent collection of poetry is We Step into the Sea, New and Selected Poems. My dear friends, it is my great pleasure to introduce Claudia Keelan.
Thank you all. Thank you, Donald. Since you mentioned those early poems, I have to change what I'm going to read. I think it's an important thing to mention too, that before I met Donald, I was living in Boston, teaching part-time everywhere, and edited an issue of Plowshares with the late Bill Knott, who was my teacher, and we ran across these poems by a guy named Donald Revell, and one of them was named Polygamy. And of course I married him. So it goes. 25, 26, 7, 28 years ago. No polygamy. We live in that part of the world. Here's the poem on the Charles River, which I took each day to go to Northeastern University and then returned to go to Boston College. Where the train meets the river. Believe me, I wanted the reply my life couldn't smear the tracings of in the rains low-voweled madness against the train window. I was falling in that reflected downpour. Trees, arms, skeletal. In the excess space, the sky fakes. My twice-removed blood, my parenthetical bond. Finally, only the sudden catch, the Charles River, gleamed in my throat after the darkness of the tunnel. Only a moment was my life removed from the face I looked away from in the window. I wanted to be on the train. I wanted to be more than reflection. I wanted to put my fingers into the mouth of the baby's scream ricocheting in the suddenly quiet car. But the gathering roar worked as a buffer to infant trauma, as if anything so loud, so deafening, must be God. So instinctively, baby stops to listen. Its mother's shh, shh, taking form in the trains, gaining momentum. The whispered lullabies for extinction. Believe me, I'm speaking, trying to monitor this breathing. It must be breathing. Inhaling the part of me that wants to look away. What then? And who has turned my face to rain? I thought that since I'm in the weird position to have had a selected poetry come out, which makes you feel almost as if you're extinct, that I would do a kind of chronological take on how, at this moment, I think that I've changed, evolved, how the poems evolved. If a poet, an American poet, comes from a canonical assumption, which I do, partially because I've always been a professor since I was 21 years old, and I've come to understand myself in terms of reading, essentially. And my heart and my temperament leans me much more towards Keats and his notion of negative capability. The idea that a poet shouldn't be nobody, that we should be a kind of vehicle through which the world whirls. The world whirls and tells its story, and my personality tries to step aside. Of course, that's an impossible task, but it's something that I've tried. It's something I've tried to teach. And this is both something I did when I was in my 20s and something that I assign a lot of times to my students. I tell them to try to go into a public place and be nobody, and to write from that position. And this was me always getting on the bus or the train in Boston. And I'm from the West. I had never been particularly in public transportation in my life. So I was overwhelmed by the human mass and needed some way to get a way to absorb it. Something to keep. Because this began from love, a whisper in passing, approval lighting her hair. Here is where my name steps in, Claudia, from the Latin meaning lame, calling us, come home. My sister's name is Regina, which means queen. From the Latin meaning lame, calling, come home, come home. I will hold us safely together. We will consider the falling whole. Crippled with an empire of days attached to her body. Do you know enough to say, the parts ask? Do you love enough to reveal us? Paper, flesh, the face of the rain on the microscope slide, your one good eye. Nothing ever again freed from the collusion of my entry, climbing the bus stair, promising to let it all wash over me, swearing to let it all wash over me, so I may give it back intact. All the eddying qualities snarling in the narrow aisle air, if I can just be quiet, not resist them, let them wash over, not into me, won't this be ours then? Won't there be room then for my omissions, his intention to kill, her 3 bags of personal sorrow, the driver's final unspoken fear of his job? I need to ask you now, teacher, why its destination you defy. See, I'm on the bus regardless, some kind of collage of coal and grief, and sometimes a bird or the wind threading here to that other there makes me especially anxious to arrive. Does the God we believe in want us, howling and dirty from the listening? How will I ask forgiveness now, driving this packed bus to the only where I know? Now let's take a little diversion away from postmodern, end of 20th century America into the 12th century. And it's good, it's Valentine's Day. I spent 20 years translating the Trovaries who were the women troubadours. Young women between the ages of 12 and 16 who were sold into marriages to put big lands together, who wrote in a tradition called Phantom World, which is pure love, which is what all love should be. Truly, what we love to make ourselves better. Right? We love to make ourselves better not because of what we want from someone, but that it will be free to make us better human beings. And of course, love is tricky. And these are little girls who have mixed feelings about their old husbands, for the most part, and about the troubadours who are coming to the court singing these songs to them, who are the lady of the poem. And they're married, so it's a tradition of adultery, in a sense, that could never be really fulfilled because then they'd be dead. But it is a tradition of adultery, and they're being sung to. And so the Trovaries are very aware of their position as women, and that it's a subject. And yet they're women who write. And so this is a very big part and important of the poems. And I'm going to ask Catherine to come up and read a tenso. Most of the Trovaries wrote in 2 voices. A tenso is a poem in 2 voices. It's kind of dialogue. And the way that Trobar worked, which is their method, is that whoever threw out the first stanza, the second person would have to follow it. It was an improvisational method, which was very interesting for the time. And it was also poetry that was written in the vernacular. It wasn't written in Latin, it was written in Provençal. And so it has all of the earthiness of this. And in this poem, Almos, Almos de Castillo was a noble woman who was neighbors with Izuit de Capio, who I'm playing in this, who lived in Avignon. This is about all we know about them, the Vidas of the Troubadours. And Almos is making the case to Izuit about her boyfriend.
Girlfriend, I'm begging, don't be rude. Drop this bad act and trade in your rage. Forgive your low-down dude and put on a good face. Though he lies there dying, he's sorry and keeps trying. If you want him dead, at least let him take the last rites, the showdown, and he will wake to stop hurting you and playing fake.
Girl, if he even seemed a little sad, he might be able to erase the upshot of his disgrace. and I might pull back from being mad, but I won't be dumb, since he's gone deaf-mute the bum, and claims to regret the wrong. No release for the liar who took away my peace. Still, if you could make him come clean, there might still be some love left in me. That ending, the way she gives up, like, oh well, I'm not gonna forgive him. No way. Oh well, maybe I will. That's such a common trope, a movement in the troubadours and the troubadour, because they're doing a song, and these were performed, and they had a certain period of time, and you had to see who would win, right? Who was really like doing the dozens, who was winning the take, and so whoever lost had to kind of just go capitulate. It's good because so much of English poetry is like finishes and confirms the argument, and this is maybe not. Okay, Jeff, would you like to come up? We're going to read a poem by Johann de Pennis and an anonymous troubadour reads, and this is a very interesting poem in the sense that it operates throughout the metaphor of war and the warrior, the way in which they are viewing love and its importance. And it begins with you. Correct.
Just as a warning, I don't have Catherine's acting chops.
Just read it.
Because I'm happy, I'll sing a song. Because I'm happy or anyway glad. And so don't hide what drives me mad, the dear thoughts I held too long. I will let go and sing of love the day after my friend, after my foe, calls for war in open field, and shows me his friend, me his foe, how two can bend so love won't go.
Soldier, yes, this is my war to wage, in word, in thought, for it's love I gauge. And though it's true, I may never find a man who sees with such full mind, who follows along on open range, and I from myself am at last estranged, when I turn out clad to fight or yield.
Woman warrior, your applause and praise offer too much to me because you are kind. The you I see now in my mind, the lover through time which makes my case, shapes flower petals through boundless space. And I will never see, wherever I turn, another form more perfect in any place, whose blossom burns light inside a trace.
My rebel slave, enabler for love, so many days I have lived with this pain because I could never tell you. What I wanted was love, not just a name, but something clean and basic, much like dew. The talkers around, tellers of custom, they couldn't understand this dread feeling, to fear love that would leave me kneeling.
My warrior woman, I love one you. You are sage without end, old wisdom. Your knowledge builds its own freedom. For what I found in you now grows in me too. My honor writes of new trust in me, close to what I am in fact, close in truth. The fear that filled my hours and days now free from rumor's choke chain, scandal's decree.
My warrior, the song is wager of your worth, and I will be true inside its determined rhyme, for the sense you sang now is mine. My flag, your token, and your prize. Another thing that's really fun with these poems that goes on is that the way in which they talk about love is always couched in terms of the poem itself. We're talking about the poem and the way that it's expressed, so that it's this it's engaged in the idea of finding the true poetry within the concept of this love, which I'm all about. Donald, please. Donald and I are going to read. This is the troubadours went through 3 phases in Provençal and Occitania, which is the land of yes. It means talk. And they lived through, well, they were disappeared after the Albigensian Crusade because Pope Innocent III came from Rome. It took 20 years to get rid of the religion of love, which was what the troubadours' poetry was thought of in Rome. It was a heretical movement. It frightened them. It spoke truth of a human love that wasn't in any way sanctioned by conventional Catholicism. And this the last phase is very weary because they've been fighting off the Roman invaders for quite a long time. At the end of it, they all disappeared. The lady of Trouverites in the troubadour tradition moves to Catalan, moves to Italy, and becomes the Virgin Mary. She becomes an unfleshed woman. And this poem by Marie de Ventadorn and Guy Diesel is in one of the final stages of it. And Marie is talking to Guy, who's given up poetry, about what she should do. I'm first. Gee, you said goodbye to all that sings, said adieu to songs and things, you who of all know what is true, leaving us the new rules to decode. A question now to make it clear. Does a girl state it man to man, or a man bow down to a girl, and where's the book that charts that world?
Maria, I gave the map to you. And now, in the ash of my adieu, here you are, back to tune the old songs we crooned. No one's ever been on top. Woman, man, girl, and boy. We are fire in our own laps when we lose romance's script.
Guy, lovers speak for their desire to say it straight. There's no joy otherwise, and girls say yes to his request when ecstasy is her recompense. For the sake of her, he's free to give, because she is both his friend and star, even though she sees him the same as friend, not the light that leads her from afar.
Maria, every book I read says desire makes men and women equal. So, when a girl wants to name the day, she should be the one to make the call. If she finds she loves him more, let her words show whom she adores. But if she cheats and sleeps with others, just smile and keep it undercover.
But Guy, it's never that way at the start when their fling is new and it's so hot that they both pretend that they're not. When he promises things later forgot. Girl, you can have me all now for free. And so she loved him then, without a fee. He can't be both her man and her slave. I don't see the logic in what you say.
Maria, talking with you, I see red. You fight to be the one on top, who says when to start and when to stop, to one who came freely to your bed. It's time to admit what you've said, that either a man can love you only as a friend, or be the one who most wants to score. And so the new rules rewrite the old.
I'll do one more that Trober reads. And this is an anonymous poem. And it's a ballada, it's a ballad, which is, it accompanies a dance, it's sung, it has a refrain, which is, I am so pretty. And I'm gonna go like this when I want you to say that. I am so pretty and I don't love my husband anymore. That is why I'm loving. I'm pretty. Small and young and ready. I'm pretty. I want a husband who is gay so we can dance the night away. I'm pretty. God help me if I ever really love.
I am so pretty.
Instead of this, my false desire.
I am so pretty.
If he would finally die and set my shame on fire. I'm pretty. There's only one thing I know. I'm pretty. If my lover wanted me more, I'm pretty. My fine hope would make our love, but he doesn't come for me. I'm
Pretty.
everybody's pretty. There's another thing I know.
I'm pretty.
But the one he always adored.
I'm pretty.
But now I say goodbye to him and any happiness he might bring. I'm pretty. With my song, I dance a pretty dance. I'm pretty. For girls to sing here and far away, I'm pretty. Hope sings too without a chance. But I'll sing about my lover anyway.
I'm pretty.
To the girls, that was the most fun of my writing life spent translating them. I was also listening to my son argue with his girlfriends, and a lot of them are like in cadence of hip-hop and rap, because that's what they were listening to when they were arguing. So translation is really carrying across into from a vastly different language, carrying it across into a language, our own, a contemporary language, so that poems that would be lost or otherwise, continue on. So I'll go on with The Scarlet Letter. This is in the voice of Hester Prynne, and as often happens with me, I'll read something that either makes me really happy or really mad, and I will respond to it. And this was something that was in an issue of Fence magazine, and it was one of those things like with the endless ad nauseum, like, does poetry really matter thing anymore, or what is American about American poetry? This was in one of those columns, and this person said, I don't like it when I find myself responding to what somebody else has written. I'd rather respond to something I know nobody wrote, like a puddle. So I said, oh yeah, I'm going to write a poem. And this is in Hester's voice. After I left the scaffold, I walked through the crowd, rights gone, the text they quoted yelling after me, meaningless, beside my own blood alpha and her fleshy perfection screaming swaddled in my arms. I saw my future, my angelhood sprung from the imagined book of my author. Not the great American novel you held sweating, angry inside your incomprehensibility in high school classrooms, but that tale of choice and retribution only history, not poetry, could record. Poetry bounced against the impenetrable wilderness to tempting nature, but she was artifice. She caressed the gaps of my story, my author's inability to love or to hate me. I, on the contrary, was free inside my demarcations and systems, breath by line, by heart, by step, leaving the settlement. You see how it is with me. Even the hair I tucked into my cap was a concept. Each sun-struck strand hid one of the ambiguities your world continues to hover erotically around, fingering the silkiness. The angel and the apostle of the coming revelation must be a woman. Yes. And I'm achieving art, disembodied inside the footsteps that step then into a puddle. Ugh, who wrote that? Shallow, natural hole, a surface with a mirror, all the townspeople's looking, crowding out my form as they grazed in steerage from that earthly hole. I believe in the Vedic tradition of poetry, which is, why would you write if you didn't want to be able to prophesy? And at the same time, I'm enough of a secularist and devoid of prophecy that I don't entirely know where I stand as a poet. Maybe you can be a secularist Vedic prophet. But this poem woke me up. I was raised Catholic, and though I didn't continue to be Catholic, you never stop it. And this was Mary, and this was Mary on Christmas Eve. Mary wasn't sure. Mary wasn't sure about any of it. She didn't like her traveling coat, and she didn't like the donkey. She didn't like the manger or the dung that had lodged itself in her shoe. She didn't like the kings and their smelly gifts. She liked paying her taxes. In this sharp clatter the coins made when counted. Though she hadn't liked the journey, none of it, or all of the new villages, one after the other, withholding all the stories she'd never hear her tell. She really didn't like the donkey that kept turning its head and nipping her ankles, and she hated her traveling coat. She liked the angels, their sexlessness, their vacant smiles so full of promise, the sudden hope she felt when they played their golden horns. She wondered if she was an angel, but no, she had a baby. He lay in a manger, no crib for his bed. She liked the baby, its helplessness. His name was Jesus. She wondered if he was an angel, but no, he was a baby. They, neither of them, were angels. They were in it together. First of all, the manger, and then the rest of the story both she and Jesus already knew. The shepherds, too. They knew, and they liked the baby who lay on her traveling cloak on the straw. She didn't like the story, except the beginning. She didn't like the way she knew how it was going to end. Not because she already, as Jesus already, knew the end, but because it was a tragedy, and she didn't like tragedies. No one would remember this, the small and smelly manger and the helpless baby who was clean and eating, who lay in her traveling cloak on the straw. No one would remember her as she was now, a girl who just paid her taxes and had a baby she called Jesus, whom she bathed in a trough and lay in her cloak on the straw. She was a girl who just had a baby. She was happy, if a little tired, and Jesus was happy, if asleep. But no one would paint this picture enough. No, she saw it all. She knew it all already. and so did Jesus in his baby sleep, dreaming himself the dead man his mother would hold forever in her lap. Catherine tells me that some of you have read O Heart, and O Heart is for sale over there. And so I'll read a little bit of O Heart. I'm not going too long so far. No. Okay. O Heart is a verse drama. I performed it at UNLV with my students in the MFA program in drama. It is a play that threads of it take up the idea of the heart through, as it's revealed through literature, and which is particularly problematic in a lot of ways, and as it is understood through the history of science and cardiology. And so William Harvey, who is the guy who figured out how the heart worked, is a main character, and it's played by Donald. William Harvey is quite irritated with all of the poets who are talking about the heart breaking. It can't break. The heart doesn't break. And it's also a book that has a central figure of the woman, you know, and these projects kind of dovetailed, you know, so I was really dealing with women's voices. And so this is a woman who's trying to understand her own heartbreak, her own sense of love. The woman is alone on stage. She's next to a tree, then on top of the water, a huge dress floating. Yes, the woman is alone with herself on stage. She is looking towards something we cannot see, you cannot see, watching her. It is her life. And it is there in sequence in a slideshow, before her eyes, behind her eyes, we cannot see. The woman looks reflective, amused even, and her hands move like speech. The woman is alone on stage. His eyes would trouble me no more. What was in Poe's heart? That all his tales express the outward murder or death of something. Old man, eyes, Ligeia, hearts, etc. While the narrator goes quickly crazy himself, embodied and disembodied in the act. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. And no one can tell if it's his or the old man's, though it becomes clear, nothing becomes clear. In the 19th century, people believed that emotions came from the heart. But now we know that they come from the brain, emotions. And that helps us too. Ahab and his whale, Hawthorne and the birthmark, and the scarlet letter, all these signs signifying the red badge of courage. Every girl loves a coward. Edna, swimming out to sea at the end of the awakening, swimming away from possession, swimming into the possession of her own heart, which drowns her. O heart, in which 4 different chambers help you live and die continuously. The woman walks around, chatting, eating. The book has fallen from her hand. She drinks in the beauty of her children's faces as they change. She herself died, and yet they call her mother. She is now her stranger. Like the Roman baths that fell into decay as soon as they were privatized, the woman's period of possession is so many pages of antiquity, and only those who love ruins love her. She is now her stranger. It is helpful to visualize the heart as 2 separate pumps working in series. Right heart, pump. Left heart, pump. The heart has 4 chambers, 2 are muscular chambers that propel blood. 2 hold the blood, returning to the heart, and at just the right moment, empty. She is now her stranger, grand inquisitor of the different chambers to help you live and die continuously. Our little girl draws hearts throughout my notebook. The shapes irregular, elongated down the page, much like an actual human heart, which is shaped more like an upside-down pear than a valentine. Her letters, likewise, do not recognize the constraints of space, nor no margins as she writes them from left to right. The stick people she draws are all the same size. Perhaps they are the first God, the mother, father, matro, pater, before they were separated and she was locked in a safe. Their betrayal thus is historical and inevitable. Likewise, or thus inevitably, the woman has misplaced the God in herself. What is lost cannot be kind. The woman in time is always written out of the creation. This appears to be a function of economy, or her participation in an economy that is designed to reduce her. By the year 200, she has many times been excised from divinity. In 1977, the year I graduated from high school, Pope Paul VI again declared that a woman couldn't be a priest because our Lord was a man. The woman is not a ruin. O heart, our divinity, generating, making itself grow, seeking itself, finding itself, mother of, father of, sister of, son of, itself, and spouse of itself. I'll finish with a couple of new poems from the We Step into the Sea portion of the event, of the program tonight, which is the first part of the selected poems. Generally, selecteds go from the beginning to the end, but I structured this so that the new poems came first because I wanted to still be alive. 3 Now and You. I turned to the children and to you and could not see your faces. A shadow eye had crept from me. She gazed now at all the vast human races sitting down beneath a desert willow tree. Shadow eye absorbed every hue there where white had shed its mystery. A 19th century's journey's end disarmed the policeman looking down from a hill. With miracle power and mystic skill, no hue, no shape, no sex picked out for first disgrace. Shadow eye saw the human races walk away from original skin into a day not named. Are you anyone? Are you anyone? Really? Are you someone? And which one do you think? Are you what? You know, Rimbaud got it right. I is another. A long time ago. You know, I is another, and another, and another, and another. Keeping that in mind is a good way to get through. Are you anyone? Really, are you anyone? And which one do you think? Are you watching the water now falling upwards, then down from the fountain? You weren't watching only, were you? You were listening too. And which came first? When you saw the water falling, is anything really itself, is it? I mean, is that part of what she meant, what anyone meant when looking, they also heard? When I'm not anyone, are you no one too? When we say we, are we sure there is agreement? Who are we? And we, where is home? The leaf takes the tree, but not me, though they blow, blow, blow at my feet. When they say we, there is no agreement. They're not we, and we are home. The wind hits the pane. There's pain blown in the rafter that looks like leaves. Could I be a leaf? Could I, and what kind? Once I knew you were me. There was someone sweet in the sound. Mr. Birdsong lives down the lane. His house has fallen from the tree. When will he sing again? When will I free me? Very interested in the relationship between the one and the many, which is so fundamental to our rhetoric in our country. And so patently disregarded and failed. We were their marriage poem. Many of us wept at the funeral. You were in the casket, and so was she. By now, we were a dearth, seen from above in the aerial photograph. By now, us was a them I saw everywhere. Are you them? Is she? Where did you stand? I was crying in the rain at the funeral. Many of them wept too, for the dream. Is there a pattern to our grief? A chalk trace for our body? Crying in the rain at the funeral, heart-shaped tears, maudlin ovals, streams of affection lost. By now, us was a refrain buried beside them in the box, where bit by bit, the sorrows of separation were shifted. Two more. Thank you so much for coming out on Valentine's Day. You gotta get out and have some fun with candy, flowers, champagne, eat something good. Nutshell. I always tell my students not to use similes. So of course, I had to write one, a bunch of them, just to break my own rule. Because really nothing's like anything else. An apple, they're all different. Everything has a genre, we're all like generic in one sense, but everything has absolute independence, so you have to be careful as poets, not be lazy, it seems. Okay, keep telling me to hurry up. Like a pine cone sitting on glass, nature and time hidden in clear sight, like an egg hovering over a nest, we were not home at home. Like the marble heart my son bought to hold down my papers, we were hard and not kind. Like the Holy Family in a nutshell, we looked in vain at the stars, like life itself. Our hope slipped slowly backward. I wanted to reach for gratitude, but she divorced me, leaving only responsibility, her stingy sister. She sat down so hard, like forever, on my heart, like raking the sand, like music left with only the drum. The clouds painted, like the roadrunner, the carnivore, the real one, and not the cartoon, eating one by one the baby quail. Oh, that's not ever again for dinner. Last one. Lots of poets like sailboats.
Okay.
I had a sailboat once. I like sailboats. Oppen Sailboat. Oppen Sailboat was not Mallarmé's, though made of words, a chance glint of some mineral element, however American the space it took to be there really. Not signing his name, he made it with his own hand. The sailboat is mine if I write it. The planet is ours. People really say that. Ours sails inside ours. The word needed was needed her, Marine, her knowing. When water makes a movement, the sailboat turns and there is meaning, a life, and stars, étoiles, as Mallarmé sets forth. Thank you.
So we'll just do a couple of questions.
Hard question.
So I'm curious about the process of translation, especially the levels of diction that you're choosing to use. Like it seemed very much that you started colloquial and then kind of you used some high diction, some low diction, which I found really interesting. And I was wondering if you could talk about like why you chose this specific
Sure.
words.
Well, when the history of the translation of the troubadours, and it's always been the men troubadours, not women, because they rarely been translated once before I translated them in English. It's often said, mostly like Snodgrass and others, Pound, it's often said to the music of the day, like when they were writing, because they were written as songs, and they were performed by jugglers, like jogglers, who it's like an early guitar, 3 strings, and so there is that musical inclination. So I was trying to find, I mean, a lot of these were country music, or hip hop, or rap, or down and out love song. And some of them, though, are much more written. Some of them are making an argument. And so the ones where the diction becomes rhetorical and the high diction are the ones where there's a point being made. And this is usually in a kind of form called trobar clues, which is usually not used often by the trovaries, but it's very hermetic. The system of the poem is within it, and it needs to be worked out. The argument needs to be worked out in that way. And of course, when as a translator, I've taught literature and poetry since I was in my 20s, and so I call, to me, the language, Shakespeare's language, which is, there's a lot of Shakespearean sound in this, is musical. And so I rely on every part of my arsenal, my ear arsenal, in order to find that. And some of them, because they were all different girls, we often make the mistake of grouping the past into a kind of commodity package, but these girls had as varying different personalities as anyone does. They were not medieval and flat in the way that we often think of. We look at things in that way. They were modern in that sense and complicated. Some of them were hilariously antic and really just trying to make the best of it and have as much fun and cause as much trouble as possible. And so that called upon a certain kind of language. And others were heartbroken by the deal that was done to them. And the language called for a high seriousness in that way too. Yeah.
I want to invite you to talk more about prophecy and prophecy in your writing specifically, both in translating Trias and in the line, the woman in time is always written out of creation. I feel that kind of prophecy of women in writing in general through history, and your voice reads, it feels also kind of this voice of God that translates over generations and generations of thinking and writing. Prophecy. That's good.
Thank you, that was a nice thing to say. Well, I think that the woman in time is always written out of creation. I mean, I studied the Troglodytes for many, many years, and at the same time I was very, very interested in the notion of the female divine that is completely studied by people like Elaine Pagels and others, you know, where God has a feminine. God is certain, there's a female God. In the Gnostic Gospels, Mary is part of the Trinity. And that got particularly written out now, didn't it? Right? So that was a big part of my coming to understand that, both as, you know, being raised Catholic and coming to the idea that how could God have a gender anyway? You know, in the way in which that we view, you know, the earth, we make things starkly things, when in fact things are part and parcel that, you know, we share our brother self, our, you know, our father self, our mother self. We'll have all of those attributes to engage. And I think that reading Vedic poetry, you know, from early as Sydney, defensive poetry, and you know, to Blake's wonderful poems, you know, that seek to know what is, like, in the world, like what is the divine in the world, is what led me to want to see that, and the point of observation, right? I mean, why would you be a poet in this world if you didn't want, like, the big thing, like, to be the one who actually we might be able to be empty enough or perceptive enough at a given moment that whatever was absolutely true of the moment could go through you and you could reveal it, right? Because you were paying attention. So in that sense, I think that the Vedic, you know, the prophetic is really, in poetry, it's always been people who are just really paying attention to what is without entrenched positions that will keep them away from seeing what is. So in that sense, what is the prophetic is seeing what is. Right. Mute. Thank you. That was a good question. You can go. You can go. Valentine's Day. Thank you so much.